Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Copilot Learning Hub live. All right, so a big topic around Copilot AI, all of these newfangled things is what is the business value? Why are we taking a big pause button on how we do things, how we've done things for a decade or more, and adding AI to it? Is it really better? What is the ROI? These are complicated questions because there's no simple yes, no, here's the answer, here's not the answer. Like all complicated questions, there's a complicated answer, and that is, it depends. So instead of trying to answer it with simple yes or no, we've brought on an expert. Please welcome Zoe Wilson, who works with customers all over the world. Every company you've ever heard of, Zoe has worked with them. And she has been going around the world having exactly this conversation. What can Copilot do for your business? Zoe, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks so much for having me, Donna. It's an absolute pleasure to be here talking about one of my favorite topics, which is business value of Copilot, specifically for Microsoft 365. But I think this applies for lots of the Copilots as well.
I think so too, because Microsoft 365 one is in your face, right? If you use the Office products, you've got Microsoft 365 showing up on the sidebar, in the thing, in the canvas. So it's one that people are exposed to more. And it's the one where people are deeply attached to their Microsoft 365, Office, whatever you want to call it. It's been the cornerstone of their productivity for the last 10, 20, 30 years, right? So having there be new features, new functionality added to it can be awesome, but also a little scary for some people. So please tell us some of the things that you've learned over the course of the last year and a half that you've been working on these Copilot conversations with people.
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, before I get into some of the things that I learned, I think it's important just to take a moment to recognize some of the things that are true around the world of work. And these stats are from the Work Trend Index report that came out earlier this year. For those of you who don't use this, it's a really, really valuable resource with research-based reports that look at different factors of work and different things that influence it. And unsurprisingly, nearly 70% of people are saying that they struggle with the pace and volume of work. What that means is that work has become faster, it's more complex, we've got more work to do, we've got less time to do it in. And actually, if you look at the trends since the pandemic, we're working longer hours, we're having more meetings, and nearly 50% of us are reporting that we feel burned out. We get too many emails, we are spending too much time in email, chats, meetings, and not enough time to actually focus on creativity and innovation.
That's very true. And after pandemic, before pandemic, we worked in the office some number of hours. After pandemic, we not only worked all the time at home, but now we also work at the office and at home, the same hours we worked in pandemic, and also just trying to keep up with the humongous tech wave that hit us 3 years ago. So not only are we doing the exact same things we used to do, we've also added on this humongous burden of new work. So I'm not surprised that the burnout rate is now higher than it was during pandemic.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, if I think about working as a consultant before the pandemic, when I traveled, people would recognize that I wasn't available for meetings. Right. Fridays used to be a quieter day to catch up with admin, but we ended up with just so many meetings, and all of that work and all of those meetings are still there. And when you travel, what people often find themselves having to do is to accommodate anyway. So we've reached this crunch point where that work is just so burdensome, and we're now looking to technology like AI to help us tackle this.
Yes.
So again, if we look at the Work Trend Index, the stats here are from a different report that came out where 90% of people are saying AI helps them save time. And when you think about the fact that we've lost time to meetings and all of these other things, that's really important. Nearly 90% of people say that it's allowing them to focus on things that are more important, and it's helping them to be more creative and to enjoy their work more as well. I mean, I don't know, Donna, does that resonate with you?
Okay, so I will tell you this, and this was so ridiculous, but it feels so basic. I'm writing a strategy paper with some people on just AI and Copilot. And my sections are responsible AI as well as, unsurprisingly, Copilot extensibility, right? Because that's what I work on. And the thought of just even starting this these sections. I don't own a 100-page strategy paper. I own, I don't know, 7 pages of it. The thought of even starting the sections, like, I have to do it, I have to do it, I have to do it. And I keep putting it off. I'm like, no, I'm in meetings, I'm in this, I'm in that. And finally I said, what am I doing? Just use Word Copilot and do a prompt, right? A basic prompt, like, please write a 2-page segment of a larger strategy paper on the Microsoft Responsible AI principles, talking about what they are and giving a practical example of each. And I got it, right? I got a 2-page thing. I changed some stuff around. I put them in the order I like. I like them in a specific order. And I adjusted some of the examples. But I was done. I'm like, wait, I was done in 10 minutes after dreading this, after dreading it for about 3 weeks. And I did the same thing for extensibility. And I learned, I didn't even know some of these new things. But it was so eye-opening to me, where it's not just, I need to use AI to do this whole project. It's, I need to use AI to do a part of the project, right? And that to me was very, very fascinating. Like any other tool, you use it to do parts of things that are, repetitive, tedious, but you're already an expert at, so you can spot where there's good scenarios and bad scenarios. That happened to me 2 days ago, and I was like, you and I are embroiled in this space, and when we're constantly surprised, I think that's a good sign.
Yeah, and so I'm the same. I spend so much time kind of talking about Copilot and showing people that sometimes I actually forget to use it for things that I'm doing myself.
Right.
But being able to get rid of that blank page paralysis and actually get started and then give it your own personal flavor, I think is super important.
Yep.
And when we look at the benefits of Copilot, there are also some other things that we found as well. So research that we did at my organization showed us that people are experiencing less cognitive fatigue. They're able to focus better. They're more adept at problem solving, more adept at switching between tasks. And that context switching and the brain drain that causes, that has a real cognitive load for us to carry. So anything that can make that easier is really fantastic. Totally. And then we also found that it was closing the skills gap, where some people maybe don't know how to do all of the cool stuff in Teams and all these other Office products because it changes so much. But Copilot was making it easier for them to get to good faster.
Yes. So what I find fascinating about the skills gap thing you said was, we've seen this in the dev tools, right? We see it all the time in GitHub Copilot. I hear this constantly, like, hey, it helped me ramp up on Python. It helped me ramp up on Python because I'm a C#, C++ dev, ramping up Python, like, what is this syntax? It's so strange. But it helped me just say, hey, take my function in C#, convert it to Python, and explain what happened. That's been my use case for GitHub Copilot for, I don't know, 3 years at this point. But to see you talk about it in productivity, where help me understand how to do this, or help me understand how to, write a strategy paper or catch up in meetings or whatever it is, it applies to all people. It's not just a dev tool.
Yeah, 100%. And that's actually a really interesting point there, because a lot of people talk about, when they look at the business value of Copilot, they point to GitHub Copilot and say, well, actually, it doesn't work as well as that. But people have to remember that GitHub Copilot's older. It's got a 2-year head start on Copilot for M365 and all the other baby Copilots.
It's like a teenage Copilot, halfway to getting a job of its own. And these are a year and a half Copilot. And part of it is GitHub Copilot has such a specific use case. Help developers code better and faster. Clear, right? You know your audience is developers. You know what you're trying to do as a dev, code. But I think for M365 Copilot, the audience is all of us. So it's a lot harder to pinpoint, like, okay, here's the benefit, because it all depends on who you're talking to. Like, it completely depends.
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. And we'll come on to some of the people and human challenges of business value for Copilot shortly. But when we think about business value, why does it even matter? Well, first of all, Copilot for M365, it is a premium license. And for bigger organizations, that can incur quite a big cost. Right. So for CFOs, CEOs, CIOs, it's really important that they're actually be able to understand and capture the business value that this is driving for them. So just saying to them, well, it's going to make people more productive, that isn't a business case. No. They need to have better insight into that. But actually, one of the things that I've observed, again, both within my organization and with clients, is that for organizations who really want to be Gen AI powered and who really want to transform their business, getting Copilot for M365 into the hands of people as quickly as possible is one of the fastest and safest ways to do this, because it helps them start to understand prompting. It helps them to start to understand context and how they need to phrase things differently. And it acts as that starting point for being able to extend and to know when to build custom, rather than just kind of, jumping to custom solutions for everything and creating technical debt. So seeing this as that starting point for the journey, I think is really powerful.
Yeah, no, I love that. I always say Microsoft Copilot is the gateway to Copilot for 365, because that one is like, look, a box, enterprise data protection, ask your work questions here. You're not having to go learn to use a tool or anything specialized here. And we all have random work questions like, what was that meeting I was in about that thing, right? Whatever it is. Then next step is M365. Then you go to extending it, doing stuff with, okay, weird data source over here. And then you go to custom. The people who go immediately to custom, like you're saying, oh my gosh, the drama. Because first, we don't know if that's the right data set. 2, if we don't know it's the right implementation. 3, you don't know if you have the right security, authentication, content moderation, blah. And 4, learning to even use it and prompt it. If you've never prompted in your life, going to a blank empty box for a product you've never seen is like, right? It's very, very confusing for people if they're not very technical, who haven't been along on the journey. So I completely agree with you. Like, do the gateway thing. Get hands-on with Microsoft Copilot, commercial data enterprise, commercial data protection, then Microsoft 365, because it's in a tool you use every day of your life anyway. Yeah, I love it.
Yeah, I completely agree. And, when we think about when we think about kind of making it easy for people to use this, making it available in the tools and the products that they use every day helps with that. And it's really important that there is something to help with that, because getting people to change their behavior is really hard.
Very hard. Very hard.
We've if I look at my own personal productivity habits, I've been managing my email and my meetings and the way that I create and collaborate and communicate and all of these things. And for years, I've got habits that I've built up over years and years and years of working, and helping people change those habits of a lifetime is really hard. So the things that we can do to make this easier for them, I think, is really important. But for organizations who get this right, who get that starting point for Gen AI, who get Copilot into people's hands, who help people change their behavior, the potential is really significant.
That's very, very true.
So when I think about everything I've seen and learned over the last 12 to 18 months, I think it's fair to say that a lot of the focus has been on personal productivity, and it's because this is such a new product. So people needed to learn how to use it. What are the things that I can do? And the product was still maturing and new features being added all the time. So when I think about this as from an individual perspective, really what I'm trying to do is to integrate Copilot into my daily habits so that I can be better, faster, more efficient, more creative, more innovative. But when we start to apply that across functions and processes, and we integrate that into business data and line of business systems, that will then start to drive that additional business value by pulling data into Copilot for M365 and allowing users to take action. And these two things will compound each other. So the more business value we can put into Copilot, the more people will use it, the more they'll drive that personal productivity, the more we'll find those use cases and scenarios for business value. And this just becomes like an exponential cycle.
Yeah. It's a flywheel, right? I hate that word, but you know what I mean, where once you start spinning the flywheel, it spins. And I've never seen it put like this before, but it makes perfect sense, where when my personal productivity and satisfaction with work, meaning I do less of the collecting numbers to put in the OKR dashboard thing, and more time thinking about what can I be doing to add more business value to my business and have more ideas, more innovation, more experiments to run, then the business value goes up, obviously. So when I spend less time doing the menial thing that I have to do every month, which I hate, the more time I can spend actually come up with better ways to move those numbers versus collect them, right? Nicely in boxes. Yeah, I love it.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And actually, so this example talks to that a little bit, where from a personal perspective, someone might use Copilot to help them capture insights from meetings, things that they'd have to write up before and track manually. And it might help them produce documents more quickly. But when we can start to allow them to interact with their CRM and create, use Copilot to create a personalized sales plan or something like that, starting to take some of those activities away that they need to do to support their clients means that they get to spend more time with their clients, potentially selling more and driving the business in different ways.
Right. Because versus going and prepping for the meeting for 3 hours, spend 1 hour prepping for the meeting and 2 hours with the customer or other customers or getting the next set of customers.
More customers.
Yes.
Yeah.
I love that. Yeah.
Yeah. So when we think about Copilot, then I think it's really important that business leaders recognize that as we think about business value, using Copilot is a choice.
Yes.
We can give people a license, but if they don't see the benefit of integrating that into how they work, they won't use it.
Yep.
So it's discretionary. It's personal productivity, which means it's personal to that individual. And it's not one size fits all. And this was a real learning for me at the start of this journey in spring last year, because everybody was asking for use cases.
Yes.
What are the use cases? What are the 5 killer use cases for Copilot? And there are not just 5, there are so many, because this is embedded across the whole M365 suite. And you might have a killer use case for finance, but if you've got 10 people in that finance department, maybe it's only relevant to 2 of them because the other people work in a different way to achieve the outcomes. So understanding that it's not one size fits all and that we all have different ways of working is really, really important to be successful.
I think that's such a powerful statement, right? Because so far we're saying, okay, here's top 10 uses for Word Copilot. We're like, for who? And some of them can apply to everyone. Like almost everyone needs to write like a report about a thing, right? It's here are my raw notes, write a report about this targeted upper management who work in an insurance company. Cool, sounds great. But that's not the only use case. And the people, as you pointed out so beautifully, the people who understand their job very well are the ones who are going to be defining the use cases for their job in their industry, much more so than me sitting in Seattle, Washington, or you sitting in the UK. There's no way, because every country, every company, every industry, every job is completely different than the next one. There's like a little commonality, but I love how you said this, where it is not one size fits all. It is very much a bespoke activity.
Yeah, and that's not to say there are not standard ways that we can roll this out, but helping people build and train their own Copilot muscle is key. And I like to talk about this as almost being like training for a marathon or starting a diet or something like that. Yeah. Going for a run once is not going to make you marathon ready. You need to actually put some, training in and build the habits. You need to build the discipline and find the way to make it work for you. And building and training that Copilot muscle so it becomes muscle memory. Yes. And not the thing you have to remember to do or remember to go to is really important.
Right. We went through this with Teams. Do you remember when Teams first rolled out, everyone was just using email? And if you'd send someone a Teams message, you would also email them saying, hey, I sent you a Teams message. Do you remember back in the day, this was a real thing? It was a real thing in like 2018, 2019 era. And pandemic made it so meetings disappeared. So suddenly we turned to Teams. Because before we would live in meetings for face-to-face, and then for conversation, we'd do meetings. And then we would have email for like formal communication. And we were trying to use suddenly Teams for formal communication? No. So it didn't replace either. We still have meetings and we still have email. It's a new thing. It's just a new thing. And I think AI and Copilot is like that. It's like, no, it's not going to replace anything really. It's going to be a new way of doing things. So when you've been in the industry for a while, like you and I, we're like, we have seen this before. And us trying to say, okay, we tried it once, everyone go home, we're never going to use Teams again. That's just strange, right?
Yeah, yeah. One of the things that's really interesting, actually, it's the same with Copilot as I observed with teams years ago. When you find those people who are really anti the product and you manage to convert them, they become the biggest proponents of it. You know, the biggest champions. But yeah, it's a new way of working, and Copilot adoption isn't like adopting any other product. So at the start of Teams, you know, we didn't actually know where we'd end up. But if we go and roll out Teams now, it's really easy for us to say, okay, so we're going to change the way that you work. This is what good practice looks like. Right. These are the things that we'll do. And when you get here, it's going to look like this. Yes. But with Copilot and Gen AI more broadly, it's not like that, because we don't necessarily know what that end state looks like. So I see this as adoption in multiple phases, because first you need to get people to understand what the product can do and how to use it and the context of prompting in different places. But they also need to have that growth mindset, that ability to go back a couple of weeks later and try something that didn't work because it might actually work in the product now, and that continued curiosity and innovation, and also critical thinking as well, because it's Copilot, not autopilot. So they need to remember that they're the one in charge, and that if they use Copilot to create something, it's on them to check that it's correct, and they can't just send it out.
Yeah, responsible AI, accountability, human in the loop. If your paper cites wrong information about a product, that's on you, because no one cares if you use like Wikipedia, Copilot, or smoke signals to write this paper. You still wrote the paper.
Yeah, 100%. So when we look at adoption and develop these kind of softer, I don't like calling them softer, but these non-technical skills are really important to develop in people as well. And then we need to help them build that Copilot muscle. And we need to do this in a way that recognizes it's not one size fits all. So, you know, we need to have different types of learning that cater for people who learn differently. And that might be everything from people who learn by reading, people who learn by doing, people who learn by seeing, people who are neurodivergent and need information in a completely different way. So thinking about all of these different lenses, and then there needs to be leadership buy-in. This is one of the most critical success factors. If this is an IT-led project without business sponsorship and leadership buy-in, it won't work.
Nope. And that, oh my gosh, that box right there, I wish I could frame it. Because it won't work if it's only leadership. It won't work if it's only grassroots, right? It has to be both. Because the grassroots, you know, you and I both all know the enthusiastic people at the bottom who are like, this is the coolest thing that's ever happened. Everyone do this. Everyone's like, can you please be quiet and go home? No one cares about your thing. And if leadership say this is important, hand waves in direction, but they don't make it a part of people's job, neither of these things will happen because everyone is busy. One of the things I know you've mentioned in the past is that the power of the demo day, where when leadership, and we did this at Microsoft, right? Our finance team had like every month demo day, show how you're using AI and Copilot in new ways. That got people hustling because they're like, it's important to put this hour on the books or 90 minutes on the books every month. This must be important, right? Leadership have to sacrifice like time and energy away from other things to say, this is important and we need to use it. But without, it can't be a tell, it has to be a show, right? They have to show it's important. With actions, not just say it's important through like mass emails. So I cannot agree with you enough on the leadership buy-in piece. And the work you all have been doing are like off the charts, like chef's kiss.
And as well as leadership buy-in, I think it's really important that organizations invest in things like prompt training, even if it's not specific to Copilot for M365, helping people understand things like responsible AI and how to prompt and how to use these tools safely. Super, super important. And if I look at the organizations I've worked with over the last year and the things that have made some of those really successful, they've got strong foundations in place.
Right.
They've done the heavy lifting to make sure that they've got a strong digital core. They've got data governance. They've already got the right licensing and good use of M365. And when we start to look across the extensibility spectrum, they might already have in place a centre of excellence for the Power Platform. They've got citizen developers and an understanding of the guardrails between low code and pro code. So that puts them in a really strong place. But it's important to recognise that's not necessarily a blocker. Organisations can fix some of that at the same time as piloting Copilot. But knowing that you need that and having a plan to get it is really important. And then from a people perspective, recognising that as part of this work, you need to change the mindset, the habits and behaviours of the organisation. You need to foster that growth mindset. It needs to be embedded within the culture of the organisation. And all of this needs to be underpinned with a proper change enablement strategy with ongoing support to help people that, this isn't one and done. This is a strategy that will take time, because this journey, we're only at the start of it.
Yes.
It's going to be really interesting to see where this goes over the next couple of years. This is just the start of a really important journey.
Yeah, and that's the thing, right? Like, I love how you said it before. The scenarios and use cases we see today are not the end goal. This is like Nokia flip phone scenarios, right? This is playing Snake, texting your friend and being like, I can call you after 8 o'clock without my mom listening. These are not the end goal scenarios. We're not at the place where AI is your cash register, your book, like our phones have become, right? A phone did not used to do these things. The fact that we call this device in our pocket a phone is funny, but no phone in the history of the world has done all of the things our current phones do. We would never even have imagined it till we got there, right? Till developers and makers and creators said, I wonder if we can solve this random problem in the world using this new thing. And I think you and I have talked about this a lot. There's going to be, there's these random problems that are annoying. Can we solve them using AI? But we have not defined them, and we need more people to use AI, just learning to use the basic tools before we get to the part where we're solving problems that we don't know about yet. So that's fantastic. I love that.
And if you look at smartphones, without smartphones, we wouldn't have Uber or DoorDash or Deliveroo. Or, there's this entire economy that has sprung up. And I think we'll see the same around AI over the next few years.
Totally.
The last point on this slide around strategy, one of the things, if I look at some of the organisations that are successful, they actually have a broader Gen AI strategy and they understand the role that Copilot, that they want Copilot to play in that. But even if you don't have that, I think understanding what your objectives are for Copilot, why do you want to try it? Is it just because everybody else does and you feel like you're missing out? Is it that you want to reduce headcount, which if that's the case, that's a really rubbish approach to take to this, because you're just thinking in the most basic terms and not actually thinking about the opportunity here. Is it the employee value prop? Do you want your organisation to be a better place for people to work? And understanding where you think Copilot can help is really important to make sure that you understand what business value actually looks like to you and how you can manage and measure that.
Yes, I love that.
And then if we just look quickly at this roadmap to business value, this is an approach that lots of organisations have taken. Start with a technical pilot, but make this really small and make it really quick as well, because this is just about spotting any blockers. But really, that second bit, that getting Copilot into the hands of real business users, that's the most important thing that you want to do on this journey. Measure the value through that pilot, identify use that value measurement to identify where the priority business groups and business users are for you to start with that at scale adoption, and then get it into the hands of people and make sure that you've got that change enablement strategy. And as you're working with the different parts of the business, start to look for those opportunities to extend Copilot, to use agents and graph connectors and plugins and Copilot Studio and get beyond the basic.
I love that, because we are, again, people should not be getting creative with, I'm going to do graph connectors and extensibility and make agents, so they know what the base thing can do. Because with all those come more complicated things like, oh, where's this data coming from? How do I query for this data? How do I, parse out this data and only focus on this data? I'm like, my friend, learn to prompt a basic one with give me this without this, in this tone, in this mode, blah, 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 before we get to fancy. Again, like we were saying, before you go compose a symphony, learn to play the piano. So
yes.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, okay. Absolutely. And for me, that the basics here is definitely yes. Copilot for Microsoft 365. Totally. Get this into the hands of people, yes. understand what it means, get people using it. And then you can start to move up this value stack with the role-based Copilot, so Copilot for sales, Copilot for service, extend Copilot. And then for the things that you can't solve by buying, extending, integrating, then you can start to look at custom, but you need to do this understanding how this all fits into that enterprise architecture and business architecture landscape, rather than just blithely going off and extending and building and creating loads of stuff that might have to be reworked or aren't governed properly.
And custom copilots, friends, oh my gosh, what a pain that is. Because first, if you're not a developer of some sort and you've never built anything, it's fine, you should do it. But there's a lot to think about. It's not just connecting up a chat box to a data source and calling it a Monday. You have to think about authentication, who has access to this data, who have access to your Copilot, content moderation, what kind of meta prompt do you have, what responses do you allow, who's the end user, what are you thinking about security, privacy, blah. There's so many basic software development principles to building a custom Copilot that the AI or the API call to the large language model is the least interesting part. All of the stuff around it, it's like building any old app, right? And having the API call just be non-deterministic rather than it being a deterministic API call. So when people go to custom, I'm like, stop. Have you done any adoption of existing ones before you're mucking around with adding something pretty complicated to an app that now it's going to have it behave completely differently than you're used to? So I love this triangle, by the way, or the pyramid, sorry, triangle. This is a fantastic visualization.
Yeah, I mean, I think it just kind of puts it into perspective, doesn't it? And one of the things that's really made me laugh over the last year is going to clients who have got big long lists of use cases for Gen AI being reviewed by their data and AI people. Most of which are out of the box capabilities for Copilot for M365.
Totally. I see the same thing. They're like, oh, I want to build a travel thing that does blah, blah, blah. I'm like, hook up to your travel database and query from this thing. They're like, what? I'm like, Yeah, I want to build like a PowerPoint Copilot to do blah. I'm like, or you could just use PowerPoint Copilot. Like, oh, yeah. But that's funny though that you've seen the same thing, that 50% or more can be handled by out of the box, maybe with a plugin or a connector somewhere.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, fascinating. I love it. Awesome. Zoe, this has been just an eye-opening conversation because you've given me a lot of new signal in directions. We sit here at Microsoft and we think we know how customers are using stuff, but to hear from people like you who work with very specific customers through their whole journey, from introducing the concept like you did a year and a half ago, to seeing where they're at now, you're able to say like, okay, just adopting it and saying see you in a year is not enough. You have to follow them through, see how it's going. So you've given me so many new insights and also so much new language on how to talk about this with people. Yeah.
Well, it's been a pleasure, Donna. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. So you have a podcast, do you?
Yes, I do. So I'm the co-host of the Copilot Connection podcast with Kevin McDonnell. It's actually coming up to our 1-year anniversary next month. I can't believe that's been going for almost a year now already. But yeah, we talk all things Copilot, all Copilot.
And everyone, you should tune into this podcast because it's extremely practical. Very practical. They have real stories, real examples of all of the Copilots, and they bring on some really fabulous guests who are doing Copilot things in their companies for real. So it's not theoretical, it's very practical, very hands-on. I will listen to it while I'm out taking walks, and I'm like, stop, let me write this down. So I learn things from your episodes all the time. So thank you for doing it for a year. It's a lot of work.
Brilliant.
Thank you.
Yeah, I can't believe it's been a year, but when we started it, we were just conscious that there was this whole new vocabulary, this whole new vocabulary, all of these new products that have been created, and we just felt it was really important to cut through some of that, like the marketing words and the hype a little bit with actually what's real, and help people being able to understand that language a little bit better.
I love it. I love the podcast. Everyone go check it out, Copilot Connection, anywhere you listen to podcasts. All right, Zoe, thank you so much for joining us. Please keep doing your incredible work, and please come back in a year and share us what you've learned from the next round of Copilot adoption. Thank you, everyone, so much for joining us. We'll see you next time on Copilot Learning Hub Live.